Okay, welcome everyone to another Collateral onboarding call, Real World Assets Edition. So today we have ConsolFreight with us. They're going to be presenting the project, telling us a little bit how they work and what they're doing, and maybe then we can go into into how this relates to Maker and what's the project and what are the plans here. So guys, if you want to take over, I'll stop sharing my screen so you can go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Juan. I will start sharing. So I'm not sure you can see that.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Can you go on full screen? Like there's like the speaker notes on the side.
Huh. Can you see that? Funny.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just go back into the normal one then, because that's not supposed to be there. You are not supposed to see that, right?
The trick is to have two screens and then you just share the
1 second.
screen instead of
Yeah, that's weird. Give me 1 second, guys. I will just take this out.
Should we start again?
Yeah, please. Sorry about that.
Don't worry, Alejandro.
Okay. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, well, let's start with it straight away. Yeah, so this component actually, Seb, I think Seb is actually going to make a comment regarding the real world assets, the working group.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So the previous week, the real world asset team has worked on 2 components. The first one is covenant structure. So it's try to design how we can assess our relationship with the asset originator, when to liquidate and what kind of due diligence we need to do before accepting an asset originator. So inside this pool, this post, there is 2 pools. You can still vote on them because there are not a lot of people that may cast a vote. So the first one is to see if people are agreeing on this structure, because it's quite a difference between this structure for real world assets and the one we have for crypto assets. For instance, for crypto assets, when you collateral go below a certain amount, you are liquidate. And that's quite easy because there is no complex mathematics or stuff like that. You go below collateral level, you are liquidate. For real world assets, it's way more complicated because, for instance, let's say a borrower doesn't repay its loan at some point. Maybe he just forgot to repay it. Maybe it is just 1 or 2 more days, and we shouldn't say that he hasn't repaid, so the collateral is 0. The collateral is maybe 90% the first day late, and then go lower and lower. So the first poll was about it, and the second one is about discretionary liquidation. So this is something quite important as we are dealing with the real world and with real world people. We can expect that sometimes stuff will go a bit odd, or someone will forget something or make something, or calculation will not go correctly. So we want to assess the opportunity to not start a liquidation as soon as there is an issue, because we are not making some B2C loan here. We are B2B, so we have a kind of relationship with the borrower, the asset originator. So we want to have the opportunity to say, okay, the covenant, there is a breach in the covenant, but it's not that big of an issue. And the asset originator say that he will bring back some equity, so some tin in the centrifuge model the following day, so there is nothing to worry about. So those are the two poles. And the second post is about the risk team non-disclosure agreements and the governance relationship. So the issue here is that most of the data from the asset originator or the loans made by the asset originator in the SPV are non-public information. So some people will need to sign NDA to get access to this data and should report back to the governance. But we will not be able to report everything. We will report some kind of synthesis. So the idea is to see if there is an issue with that or not. Currently, both pools are quite okay, but we still need more votes to go forward. And that's about it.
Awesome. So thank you very much for the intro. And with that, actually, I will start actually the presentation of ConsolFreight and what we're doing. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Alejandro Gutierrez. I am the co-founder and the Chief Strategy Officer of ConsolFreight. I'm here with Ernesto Vila, that is my co-founder and CEO of the company as well. So first of all, allow us to say that we are really excited to be able to take part in this project. I think that is fantastic that you guys are opening DeFi to real world assets, and we see actually there is a big synergy for what we do. And what we do, right? Our vision as a company is quite simple: is to digitalize the procurement of liquidity for the logistic industry and the international trade. Why? Because it's an industry that is at the moment heavily reliant on paper. Sort of processes internally that are done still by moving paper around, and we believe that changing the way that the industry is moving will allow to actually provide better services to the end customers, and also will decrease the barriers of entry for the people that need the most liquidity, right? So how are we going to be doing that, right? We'll be asking, and is using a collaborative ecosystem that integrates all the entities that are taking part in international trade. You can call it freight forwarders, buyers, sellers, financial institutions, funders, insurers, and just putting every single one of these people in a platform, right? And that platform will allow us, actually using blockchain and other technologies, to basically provide some sort of a trust between the entities. That is something that doesn't occur really or quite frequently in the international trade. Like, this trust is one of the key things to solve. All right. So what is ConsolFreight? From numbers point of view, well, ConsolFreight is a company that was created in 2016. We have presence in 3 countries: in the States, in Spain, and in Ireland. The founders, and this is quite important, right? Because ConsolFreight is a new company. However, the founders, we have a combined experience of 50+ years in the logistics, in the supply chain, and in the shipping industry. Ernesto has been in the logistics game as a freight forwarder for the last I know this guy for a long time ago, and since I remember him, he has been in the game. Personally, the same for me. My family, actually, they own freight forwarders, so since I remember, actually, I have been in contact with this business, right? We have 17 members that are well, is working in different matters in the company, from IT, strategy, marketing, and so on. And also we have actually 3 products and services that we are providing. The first one is a logistics network that basically, for freight forwarders to be able to do their jobs, they need a counterparty in the other side of the world in order to coordinate transportation or logistics. So companies usually go into these networks just to find these partners. So we have that, and that serves as well as a risk mitigation layer. I will be explaining this later. The second product that we have is the freight invoice finance. That is the sort of factoring using freight forwarding assets. And the third one is trade finance, right? So just to give you a bit better understanding and context, right? Because probably not everybody is familiarized with the concept of what freight forwarders or how the international trading happens. So there are 4 main parties that are important for the maker community to understand, right? The first one is the freight forwarder, that as I explained, they are the ones who are organizing and actually they are coordinating all the logistics for a cargo to go from destination to origin, right? At destination, you have a seller, right? That is called shipper as well. And they are the origin of the goods, right? Those goods are going into a buyer that is the destination of those goods or the transportation, right? And this buyer usually is the one who is getting in contact with the freight forwarder to provide the logistics services, right? On top of that, the freight forwarder, most of the times, they don't own the transportation assets, meaning the boats, the planes, the trains, or any other mean that is needed to do the physical transportation of goods, which means that they actually go into a carrier that are the ones who are facilitating that service, right? So you will see that those 4 entities are the ones that actually are managing most of the international trade. Then we have actually, our product, or we believe that our product actually is in a unique position, and the reason behind is, one, because we are connecting the different supply chain flows together. Usually, you will have a good connection between the data flow and the financial flow, especially in international trade. However, the physical is somehow disconnected from it. So as we are in this position that we have, for example, a network of freight forwarders, we're going to be able just to have the 3 flows connected, which is going to get a better visibility, right? As we have that physical flow, we're going to be able to provide provenance of the goods. That is something that international or supply chain finance providers barely have. Usually they don't have any contact with the goods. They don't know what is put inside container, for example. We do, because we have actually the freight forwarders. And on top of that, we're able to collateralize the assets that are put actually on those containers. How? Because we have the custody of the goods, and also we have the bill of ladings that are actually the documentation that proves that somebody has a ownership or title of goods. Also, we have a platform that helps everybody to collaborate and increase visibility, and also allows the faster dispute resolution. What I want to say with that, like, is normal that there are disputes in the logistic operation, and having a platform that actually can point at what time an incident happened will actually help solving these disputes. So for example, the use of IoT is something that we have in our platform and is heavily used, and will allow us, as I say, just to provide that visibility that is needed. Also, we have the financial and the commercial risk mitigation through technology. Say one of the things that we do is, for example, using IoTs, but not just that. From the financial side, for example, using the team-like protocol, and the structure, the financial structure, will allow us actually to mitigate risk. And also we have some APIs with external providers that help us get better understanding of the risk that we're going to or will come if we are financing assets. We are on top of that providing access to fresh liquidity as opposed to, for example, letters of credit that they go against your books. And finally, we are decreasing the barriers of entry to create financial inclusion for SMEs. So now I'm going to actually talk about the products, right? Because I think it's important to use for everybody to understand what are the products that we are or that we're meant to use to Maker to fund, right? The first product that we have is freight forwarding invoices, right? And basically, this is a service to provide liquidity to freight forwarders, right? The freight forwarder business is a business that requires a lot of cash, right? And not having it will impact the growth of the companies dramatically. It means that you always need to actually put more and more liquidity. So how we're going to be providing this liquidity? So the freight forwarders actually can use the invoices coming from upstream or downstream the supply chain, either their customers, that are the shippers, or from the carriers, that are their suppliers. And the idea is to actually using financial tools as factoring or reverse factoring to get those assets and become those assets and provide liquidity, right? What's the difference in what we do? Well, because we have these freight forwarders in our network, and also we know that these invoices should be provided by documentation like bill of lading. We know that this is not just an invoice, actually. This is the representation of an operation that has already happened, right? Without that, we're not going to be able to finance anything. So that gives an extra layer of security mitigation, right? Then the second product actually that we have is the trade finance of cargo, right? So this one is usually a buyer has a requirement for purchasing goods and gets in touch with a seller, right? And normally the trade finance is provided by a financial institution, say a bank, using a tool that is called letters of credit, right? There is assessment for this tool. Actually is conducted checking the parties that are taking part in the transaction and the parties' effectiveness to actually repay the loan, right? However, we're taking a completely different approach from this because we're not only checking the entities, but we are also using the freight forwarders in our network to collateralize the goods that are inside all the goods actually that are being transported, right? So the reason behind, as I explained previously, is because we held the title of goods of these BLs. So what is this allowing? Actually, this allowing a whole holistic supply chain finance view. We're not just checking a small component, segmenting a small component of supply chain. We are checking holistically what is happening and being able actually to take decisions and mitigate risk in a way better manner, right? Now, how are we putting actually these products to work with Centrifuge, right? So ConsolFreight as an asset originator will aggregate invoices from either freight forwarders or from buyers, right? And these assets will be tokenized using the Centrifuge protocol, right? So the idea is that we use those NFTs as collateral in order to withdraw loans from the protocol in DAI. I think it's important to mention that we are funding users in fiat, right? And this actually is allowing the circulation of DAI as well. That is one of the things that I think real world assets is supposed to mitigate. Regarding the structure of the pools, so Centrifuge actually has created like a dual token model that simulates a junior and a senior tranche, and they are called drop and teen. So we have drop is the senior tranche and teen is a junior tranche, right? The idea is to attract actually different type of investors because, well, there are investors that are willing to just take more or less risk, and that helps as well to attract people to put money on it. And the investors, actually, the way that they're putting the money is using the centrifuge protocol, and they're putting their DAI against the tenor drop, depending on trends that they are going to invest. And after the pool reach that maturity, what they will do is actually they will claim their returns plus their benefits, right? So one of the things that is important actually to explain is that how we are assessing the risk, right? Because yeah, we have gone through what the process is, but now we are just, I will try to explain you how we are assessing the risk and also how we are pricing these assets, right? And we have two different determination models. We have one determination model that is for the freight factoring, right? And we have a second one that is for the trade finance products. They are different because there are different entities taking part on each of the processes, but also because the mitigation of risk is different, right? And we need to just check different parameters as well. So for the first one, actually, I think it's important to mention that in order for people to participate, right, in these services, they either need to be a freight forwarder from the Forward Together network, right, or the freight forwarding, the logistic operation needs to be conducted by one of our members of that network as well. So that's kind of the first layer, right? That's a requirement. So in order for someone to become a member, right, or for a freight forwarder to become a member, we have a two-gate process. The first gate actually is an external assessment using their name, their address, and their company registration number. That is a unique number in every single country. We use that against one of our external providers, and it will give us an understanding of the credit record of this company, right? If they have a good enough credit record, we will go actually into the second gate, and this one is just to check the internal capabilities, right, of the company. Are they able to operate as a freight forwarder? And we check different parameters, like for example, licenses, because there are some countries that require a license for you to operate as a freight forwarder. Years in the market, there are some statistics that are showing that new freight forwarders usually fold within the first 3 years. So having freight forwarders that have been in the market for longer than that is a good sign. We ask reference, either clients or the suppliers of them, and we actually vet those references as well, just to make sure who they are and they are trustworthy or not. We check media assets, and this one is important because freight forwarders usually don't have much presence media-wise on the web. So if they are doing this, means that they are a bit more mature and they are more established, right? And finally, it's just the physical presence of it. Because, for example, if you do a Google Maps search, you can figure out where they are located and if they have different assets, they have yards, they have trucks or things like that. Just an understanding, right? When this gate actually is passed, what happens is we are taking a risk assessment of every single one of the assets that they are providing, right? So as soon as they are accepted, then from that point, they can start actually putting assets through our system. And what we are doing actually is a 1 to 5 score, and we score them on multiple factors, right? So for example, the payer credit worthiness, the relationship between the parties, that is important because usually companies that have been transacted for a long time means that there is some good existing relationship. And that decreases the risk. You will have as well the payer's industry and the payer's country. And those two are important, and they are coming actually from external providers that we will be showing soon. From there, on top of that, what we're doing actually is an operation risk mitigation as well with incremental growth and diversification of thresholds in the pools. Reason why you don't want to have a pool that is heavily focused on high risk assets. So that's something that we do as well. We try to just mitigate and make sure that it's a well-balanced pool. And now on the trade finance, the termination model, similar, you can see that the first gate is exactly the same. The second one is a bit different. And this one is because we are actually providing this service to the buyers. So we go actually a bit deeper on their side and we ask for articles of incorporation, proof of bank accounts. And this one is important because we need to know who we're actually sending the money to, right? And they have ownership of it. And we ask for bank statements, especially now post-COVID. You can see that years of credit have been wiped in minutes. So it's important actually just to see what is happening on their side. And proof of previous transaction between the parties if that's something that exists. So from there, we go and we do the same risk assessment, 1 to 5. In this one, we are actually checking some different factors, like for example, previous transactions using ConsolFreight. That's one that is important because we're building trust, and the most trust that we have with you, we are going to actually just give you a better scoring, right? Relationship between the parties, as I mentioned before as well. Seller industry, we have buyer's industry and the buyer's country. So that's where we are. Now I will show you actually how the assets are actually scored. So as you can see here, we have all the factors, right? And we'll be giving 1 to 5. There is a description of it, and based on that, you're going to get a scoring, right? There is a risk rating, and that risk rating is going to be giving you what the advance rate is and what is the deposit. This is an example for the trade finance, right? Because in trade finance, you will have a deposit that you need to pay the supplier in advance before they actually starting just putting or processing an order. So as you can see here, you have a risk rating, and that risk rating actually just translates straight away into a pricing model. So here's an example, actually, the pricing model that we have for CF4. That is a pool that we're working at the moment with Centrifuge, and that we are planning for Maker to be part of. You can see actually that there are different advance rates, that you have a different financing fee and recovery rate and so on. And then that risk rating, you will see that have completely different credit scores from our side, right? Why? Because we have from A to D in every single one, right? And we have straight factoring assessment, we have reverse factoring, and then we have the trade finance. And that actually is taken by Centrifuge in order to just be able to just put the different pricing. So next, next we have the pools, or the previous pools. So far we have actually deployed 3 pools using Centrifuge and the Team Lake protocol. The first 3 actually were static pools. They started in May 2020, and the final one, or the third one, was actually in August 2020 as well. It's close actually to be finalized, and payment terms will range from 30 to 60 days. A final one was a pool that was not only for freight invoices, but also was for trade finance, and was our first one. You can see actually that the total deploy is 165,000, and we have deployed 107 assets. 107 assets so far.
Alejandro, static means that there's no team, or it means something else? It means that
sorry?
Won't be. What does static mean in this case? It means that the pool won't
Static,
be changed and won't be like rolling, or?
Yeah, exactly. So it has an starting and a fixed end point or end date, right? That is the meaning. Yeah, and you can see over here the drop yield. Why we have probably a higher drop yield in CF3? Well, because we were attracted actually people to invest in trade finance. Now we proved it, which means that we can go back actually into the norm. That is a lower yield on that. And the underlying asset default rate is less than 1%, and CF3 is still open, right? Now, as I mentioned, we released actually 2 weeks ago CF4. This one is a revolving pool. The collateral type is freight forward invoices and also cargo, which means that it's freight finance and also trade finance. In revolving pool, so far we have 260,000 invested, and we have actually deployed 122 DAI to date. Probably this week we already have some extra assets that will equate probably to most of that 260 by the end of the week. The drop yield on this one, 8%, same story. We already have proved that this works, which means that now we can just make it more competitive, because the fact is, if we want to scale this product, we need to make it competitive. And as it is right now, we need to just go against big financial institutions. And the idea will be just get cost of money as low as possible to just be able to provide a competitive service. We have the team ratio, so we have 15% of team that is that junior trench. It's kind of supportive of taking the first losses. We have invested in the team so far in every single one of the pools, which means that we have a skin in the game. We trust what we're doing, and we have our collateral token, that CF4 drop, right? Now, well, as Seb mentioned in the beginning, we're working with the team, and the next step will be on the reporting, right? Like the cadence of the reporting, the data points, are going to be able to facilitate or not, and what will be the covenant series for Maker to be able to join actually this pool. That's it from me. Thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you.
we do have a couple of questions here in the chat. There is like if there could be a real world example that maybe a short one that we can go through to give a little more context for maybe more people to ask questions, or to clarify what remains unclear. And then the other one is about risk evaluation.
Okay. Agnes, you want to give an example?
Sure. So on the two products, the freight invoice finance and the trade finance, I'll give you very quick real samples. So the freight invoice finance is a simple receivables finance. It's a simple factoring. In other words, a freight forwarder provides transportation services to their clients, and that generates an invoice. And the way we validate that transaction really happened is because when they're submitting their assets, they're accompanying that invoice with the transportation document, typically a bill of lading, which is a very traceable document. So it's pretty much our way to validate that the transaction really took place, right? So that's a very simple known factoring transaction. The trade finance operation, which is by far our most innovative solution. Think of most goods that are around you are most likely manufactured in China. So 60% of all trade between in the world happens between China and the United States. So a lot of goods moving in that trade. So basically, buyers place orders, let's say, in order for computers that are going to be manufactured in China. And the typical is that on that transaction, let's say that the transaction is worth $100,000 worth of computers. The typical is that the buyer needs to pay a deposit to the manufacturer, so that manufacturer starts the process. And when the goods are ready, they need to pay the balance before they send it out. And then in that transportation, while that is on the water, is good 30 days in transit, where the buyer doesn't have the money or the goods. So it gives, that's a lot of burden financially to them. So what we're trying to do is unlock that value that is trapped on its ship while it's in transit. And what we do is, since the freight forwarders are the ones that are providing the logistics, meaning we touch it, we load the containers, we can see what it is, we can provide provenance on the goods. We also put IoTs on it whenever it's needed, meaning the value of the goods justifies having an IoT to have more visibility on the goods. But what we're doing is taking the goods as collateral. So in our processes, let's say the manufacturer requires a 30% deposit. We request a minimum of 20% deposit depending on the qualification of the risk on the buyer. So that means that they will deposit 20% through our SPV, and we will submit a 30% payment to the manufacturer. And when the goods are ready, that were forward stake possession, we send the balance. And basically, we're taking the physical goods as collateral, the invoice, and the bill of exchange, which is the bill of lading. So the freight forwarders issue the bill of lading. Literally, this is an over-collateralized transaction, right? If you think of a typical factoring, you have documentation, but in the worst case scenario, if somebody goes bankrupt, well, you start with paper. In this particular case, we have paper, meaning the invoice. We've got title of goods, which is the bill of lading, but most important, we've got the physical goods in our custody because we're transporting it. So if an eventual event happens that somebody goes bankrupt, we have the physical goods that we can liquidate that has already previously been de-risked by 20% deposit provided by the buyer. So if you ask me, it's a very safe transaction. So I don't know if at a high level that pretty much explains the product.
Finding R asked if the risk evaluation is done manually and how do you do it?
Yeah, there is it is there is a component of manual and a component of automated. Which eventually will move to a more automated process. So we've got the suppliers that apply on our platform, and we gather pretty much all the information that we require in order to do the assessment. Some data is verified through third parties, partners that we have, like Euler Hermes in this particular case, that gives us the country risk, the supplier's risk, the AN number, meaning the existence of the company, and we gather all this information and we get to this scoring that we provide. So it's in a large percentage manually.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I got a quick question, Ernesto. You said something about in case of default, there's a way for you to kind of recompensate by. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you get an order from Apple and you got 10,000 iPhone 12s in there, and Apple for some crazy reason doesn't settle the invoice within net 45 days, I guess you could auction off those 10,000 iPhone 12s.
That is correct. So the applicant, meaning the buyer that is asking for a loan, they should sign the agreements with the terms and conditions of this loan, right? So part of the agreement is that they're pledging the goods as collateral, and the typical is at destination when it arrives, they should pay. But in the event that it doesn't, there again, we, the freight forwarders in the network, are the ones that issue the bill of exchange, the bill of lading, and that's the rightful title of the goods. So in the event that somebody doesn't pay and it's confirmed it's a default, it could definitely be liquidated.
So if the invoice is net 45, you don't deliver the goods until after 45 days or before?
So in trade finance is different than an invoice, typical invoice that has a maturity date when it's issued, because the cargo, so the invoice is issued before even is manufactured, right? So there's a lot of variances into maturity, meaning manufacture could take a little longer. Transportation could take a little longer because ships do, ports, transshipment. So the maturity is actually upon arrival. So upon arrival, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, right? It needs to clear customs. There's a short window to do that without penalties. So hitting the ports is when an invoice is submitted to them that is to be, at site, right? So that's what that process looks like.
Okay, thank you. And then real quick, because other people have questions, you guys own the trucks and the ships, or you guys are more like brokers? And real quick, because people have questions.
Yeah. No, we don't own the assets. The freight forwarders in the network do. And once again, some own the assets. Some of the assets are subcontracted.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, this is Akash. I had a couple of quick questions. So again, there's a little bit of confusion in my head of like, how does at the end of the day, it's a drop token that's being deposited into the Maker protocol, right? So how is those drop tokens, like what's the Oracle Live pricing for those drop tokens, and like, what's the collateralization ratio or expected collateralization ratio? Like, so in that case, like how does liquidation work? And then from an auction keeper side, or, we're moving to like auctions V2 and things like that. Like, how does the end buyer of drop eventually convert back to DAI? So they need to take drop somehow, get to real world assets and get back to DAI, right? How does that process work? Sorry, I'm asking a bunch of questions, but I've listed it in the chat also. And then kind of like what I'm trying to also understand is like, what are normal banks charged for this collateral type? And then like, how is Maker going to be competitive to that rate? And how leveraged will the minter of DAI eventually become? And then I'm also kind of curious, what do the 10 returns look like? Sorry for the large list of questions, but it's also in the chat.
Akash, I think maybe Seb, are you interested in answering on just like what the Real World Assets Working Group has been doing to answer all these questions? I don't want to like preempt anything, but like one key point that I wanted to highlight is that this is like a big impact for DAI, is that how this collateral type is used is not for someone to get more leverage, but for, in this example, ConsolFreight to actually go borrow this money, sell DAI on the market, and then take the US dollar and give it to these companies. And so that actually is not, they're not going to leverage, it's not going to use to leverage or speculate and sort of arbitrage the Maker stability fee versus like some DAI yield or some drop yield. But really the goal is here that this is a primary source of capital for the asset originators. And it means that that it has like two benefits. It means that, well, ConsolFreight has a steady stream of business of originations that they do. And so they have a steady demand of DAI because they want to borrow that amount. And so that puts, that stabilizes and increases the supply of DAI. And the other thing is actually those DAI then are not getting locked up into another yield farming pool, but right by the person that mints their DAI, or sort of a lot of what you see today, it actually creates like uncorrelated, like immediate liquidity on the market. And so that I think is interesting about your question of like the leverage and what it looks like. But maybe, yeah, Seb, if you want to.
Yeah,
chime in.
I want to add that it's not a vault to have some leverage. For instance, we will add more probably some Uniswap pools, liquidity pools. Those will be used for leverage. You will put your Uniswap pool tokens. Those will yield, I don't know, maybe 8%. The interest rate of the vault will be 4%. You will mint some DAI, and buy a new Uniswap tokens. So this is just leverage. For real-world assets, currently, it is not really to do some kind of leverage because we are lending not to everyone, not to drop token holder, but to the asset originator directly. Not really the asset originator, but an SPV, which is the entity holding all the loans. So it's quite different than other maker vaults. So I don't know if that answer your question of.
Well, okay, I guess, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but like, you guys are the expert in this. So like, when do things go bad, and explain when things, like, kind of go through the scenarios of when things go bad, and like, you know, where is the maker protocol at risk, and then kind of like, how does the auction mechanism solve that risk?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm asking the wrong questions.
No, it's a perfect one. We have this kind of question ourselves almost every day because it's not that easy. But currently, the liquidation process, so there is two kinds of liquidation. First, if there is a non-performing loan in the SPV, the asset originator has to do something about it, or the SPV will lose some money. So this is we ask the process from the asset originator to understand how they can collect or recollect some money. So for every asset originator, it will be a bit different. If you are in real estate, it's likely it's more easy to recollect some amount of money because you have some kind of real estate property as collateral. For freight forwarding, it's maybe a little bit more difficult, but you have still some ways to recollect an amount. And on the other side, the maker side, at some point, there is no longer enough collateral to sustain the loan. So in that case, we are still wanting to be over-collateralized. So for instance, if we lend, if all the drop is 1 million, we expect that the asset in the SPV is a bit more than that. So if the asset goes below safety level, we will ask for liquidation on the drop token we have in the vault. And how does that work? It's for ConsolFreight, the loans are quite short term. So the first repayment of the loans will be for maker. We expect that not every loan will be in default. So we will get the money back in 30 to 80 days. So there is two kinds of liquidation. On the SPV, over the loans, and on maker, over the SPV, the drop token. But there is always a risk. That's why we are asking a risk premium.
How often said is the, so this is a little bit on the Oracle question, right? So how often is the value of the SPV reevaluated and communicated to maker, if that's the case?
So we are currently working on that, understanding how we can process the valuation. Currently, we are going to do it monthly. So there is one valuation from Centrifuge, which is on-chain. So this one is updated, I think, most likely daily or even more often. I will let Lucas comment on that. But we, on the risk team, currently we want to have another asset valuation method, just in case we have some disagreement on the valuation, and to check in details, like doing some sampling to see if the data fits the model. And that will be done monthly. And we intend to automate it the most we can after some time. But at the start, it will be quite manually.
Makes sense. Any more questions or anything that Alejandro or Ernesto think that might help the understanding?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, is this being used by banks currently as a collateral? or it's just too hard for them?
Yeah, the banks are unable to link the physical flow to these transactions when they do letter of credit. So and that's why this product is way more convenient for companies. So when a company goes to a bank and open a letter of credit, what they're getting is a liability in their books. And if they're buying that container of computers that is worth $100,000, and the cargo arrives, and instead of arriving computers, they receive rocks, they still owe the bank $100,000, and that might trigger an event that the buyer could go bankrupt, therefore putting at risk the bank itself. In our protocol, since we're doing provenance of the goods, we do physically validate that computers are going into that container. That is the collateral. And banks don't have the ability because they're not working off the freight forwarders. They're just independently, right? Although banks and freight forwarders do work together a lot every time there is a letter of credit, just for document compliance, but nothing else.
And what about like weird externalities? Like let's say the ship sinks or something like that. So is there like additional insurance that covers those kind of situations? Like what are the potential holes where, again, maker could be hurt?
Yeah, so when we issue our terms to a buyer for trade finance, one of the terms that we need to place a commercial insurance on it. So there's open cargo insurance for cargo that covers all the risk, the commercial risk, meaning a fire, cargo theft, damage, a ship sinks, all the commercial risk. The things that are not covered onto those, typical cargo policies are financial risk, and that's how we mitigate that through the collateral, right, and the provenance of it.
Okay, great. And what do the 10 returns look like? So like drop is supposed to be about a 10% return, is that right? So what is 10? Since it's a high yield product, what kind of returns are those?
I believe it's about 15, if I'm not mistaken, but it's variable, and it's variable in the sense that all the risk is staying there, right? So if first defaults come in, it will affect the team return and pull overall, right? So I don't know if I answered that correctly, Alejandro, or
right, like yeah, that's true. For the first 3 pools was 15. For the fourth one is a bit less. It's in the range of 12 at the moment.
Any last question before we close?
There's one more in the chat. How do you prevent scams? For example, getting something worthless as collateral, who assumes risk, and how is it resolved?
Well, there are many layers. So the very first one is the obvious, whether establishing a prior relationship between buyer and seller, right? If the buyer and seller have been transacting for a period of time, that means that the buyer has accepted goods from the seller and has paid for it in good conditions, right? So that's the first layer. The second layer is it's very common that the freight forwarders house the goods at their warehouse at the time of loading. And in the absence of that, we also send a third-party validator to inspect the goods at the time of loading.
Yeah, like I think that
like SGS or things like that. Yeah,
definitely the most critical is the provenance, right? It's the provenance of goods, and that's something that we do. Like we send either as a freight forwarder that will be there, and depending of the value actually of the goods, it will be a third-party validator. Let's say SGS. So you have the guys like Veritas that they are specialized actually on providing what is the real value of goods. When these goods are actually have higher values or they are more risky, right? And all this is part actually of the requirements that when we are signing the contracts with buyers, we say, look, if you want to take our service, you will need actually as requirement to comply with all these things, and they need to pay for those additional services as well.
Yeah, and most buyers are happy to pay for an inspection that validates their goods or what they intended to purchase. So it hasn't been a problem so far.
Thank you, Akash, for the question. And yeah, thanks Alejandro and Ernesto from ConsolFreight for having joined us. It was really nice having you. Hopefully we helped everyone, well, starting with myself, understand a little bit more what's happening behind the scenes. And yeah, let's keep the discussion going in the forum. I don't know if you guys have like one last parting words before we close.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be part of this project. Honestly, love to be part of it and the entire DeFi scheme.
Nice having you. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye-bye.